The flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the immaculate obsidian paint of a $150,000 Range Rover weren't just the start of a routine police encounter. For Officer Thomas Decker, it was the bust meant to secure his promotion. For Judge Raymond Caldwell, it was the genesis of a $10 million reckoning. The biting wind of late November whipped through the brightly lit canopy of the Chevron station on Route 114. It was 10:45 p.m. on a Tuesday. The suburban enclave of Oakdale was asleep, leaving the roads desolate and the gas stations quietly humming under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. Raymond Caldwell, a man of 62 with silver-flecked hair and a posture that commanded respect, even in exhaustion, stood beside his 2025 Range Rover SV autobiography. He was dressed down for the evening, a heavy charcoal cashmere overcoat layered over a plain black turtleneck. After presiding over a grueling, high-stakes federal racketeering trial for 14 hours, all he wanted was to fill his tank and make the 20-minute drive to his home in the affluent gated community of Stone Creek. He stood quietly, watching the digital numbers on the pump tick upward, his mind lingering on the complexities of jury instructions. Across the four-lane intersection, tucked in the shadows of an abandoned strip mall, sat Oakdale Police Department Cruiser 42. Inside, Officer Thomas Decker rhythmically tapped his thumbs against the steering wheel. Decker, 34, was a man whose ambition vastly outpaced his judgment. He was known in the department for his aggressive tactics and a troubling volume of civilian complaints, all miraculously swept under the rug by a union rep who shared his penchant for cheap whiskey. Beside him sat Officer Sarah Jenkins, a 23-year-old rookie only 3 months out of the academy, still idealistic and strictly by the book. Decker's eyes narrowed as he spotted the Range Rover across the street. He leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. He took in the vehicle, a custom model rarely seen outside of Beverly Hills or Manhattan. Then, he took in the driver, a black man in a casual sweater, driving a 6-figure luxury SUV late at night in a predominantly white, affluent suburb. "Look at this guy," Decker muttered, tossing his half-empty coffee cup into the center console. "Probably out of the South Side, taking a little joyride." Jenkins glanced up from the mobile data terminal. "What? Who?" "The Range Rover at the Chevron," Decker said, shifting the cruiser into drive. "Nobody just drives a $150,000 car through Oakdale at 11 at night wearing a sweatshirt. That thing's gotta be hot." "Did you run the plates?" Jenkins asked, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Don't need to," Decker scoffed, pulling out of the parking lot without signaling. "I know a stolen vehicle when I see one. Gut instinct, rookie. You'll learn." Before Jenkins could type in the license plate, Decker had already floored the accelerator, tearing across the empty intersection. He didn't hit the siren, but he flipped on the light bar as he swerved violently into the gas station lot, braking sharply at an angle that effectively blocked the Range Rover from exiting. Raymond Caldwell didn't flinch. He slowly turned his head, the nozzle still engaged in his vehicle, and watched as the cruiser's blinding strobe lights washed over the pumps. He had spent 35 years in the legal system, first as a ruthless defense attorney, then as a highly respected prosecutor, and finally as an appointed federal judge. He knew the choreography of law enforcement better than most police chiefs. Decker threw open his door, stepping out with his chest puffed and his right hand resting instinctively on the butt of his holstered service weapon. "Step away from the vehicle," he barked, his voice echoing loudly off the metal canopy. Caldwell calmly unlatched the gas nozzle, returned it to the pump, and screwed the gas cap back onto his car. He then closed the small fuel door with a soft, expensive-sounding click. Only then did he turn to fully face the officer. "Good evening, officer," Caldwell said, his voice a rich, resonant baritone that had silenced unruly courtrooms for a decade. "Is there a problem?" "I said step away from the vehicle," Decker yelled, closing the distance. He stopped a few feet away, shining his heavy tactical flashlight directly into Caldwell's eyes. Caldwell raised a hand, shielding his vision from the blinding glare. "I am standing at the pump, officer. I've finished fueling. Now, I will ask you again, politely. What is the reason for this stop? I ask the questions here, pal, Decker sneered, taking another aggressive step forward. Hands on the hood of the car. Now. Jenkins stepped out of the passenger side, hanging back near the rear quarter panel of the cruiser. Decker, I haven't run the tags yet, she called out, her voice betraying a hint of nervousness. Quiet, Jenkins, Decker snapped without looking back. He returned his glare to Caldwell. Whose car is this? It is my car, Caldwell replied evenly. He made no sudden movements. He kept his hands entirely visible, resting loosely at his sides. If you provide me with your name, badge number, and the reasonable, articulable suspicion you have for detaining me, I would be happy to provide you with my license, registration, and proof of insurance. Decker let out a harsh, barking laugh. Oh, we got a roadside lawyer here. Look at you using big words. Reasonable, articulable suspicion. You learned that on a TV show? I learned it at Harvard Law, Caldwell stated, his tone dropping an octave, turning cold and authoritative. Now, officer, you are violating protocol. You have blocked my vehicle, initiated a detention without cause, and have your hand resting on your firearm. I strongly suggest you de-escalate this situation immediately. The absolute lack of fear in Caldwell's voice enraged Decker. He was used to panic, to stuttering, to immediate submission. This man's calm defiance felt like a direct assault on his authority. Decker's face flushed red beneath the flashing lights. Listen to me, you arrogant son of a bitch, Decker hissed, pulling his handcuffs from his belt. You're going to put your hands behind your back, or I'm going to put you on the concrete and do it for you. You are under arrest. For what, exactly? Caldwell asked, standing his ground. Grand theft auto. Resisting a lawful order. Take your pick. You haven't run my license plates, Caldwell pointed out, looking past Decker to the young female officer who was watching with wide, terrified eyes. Officer, I highly recommend you run the plates on this vehicle before your partner does something that will end his career. Turn around, Decker roared, lunging forward. He grabbed Caldwell's expensive cashmere coat, violently spinning the older man around and slamming him against the side of the Range Rover. The impact sent a loud thud echoing through the quiet night. The cold metal of the Range Rover bit through Caldwell's coat as Decker pressed his forearm hard against the back of the older man's neck. For a brief second, a flash of pure, unadulterated rage spiked in Caldwell's chest. It was the primal, human reaction to physical assault. But the judge was a master of self-control. He knew the law. He knew the statistics. And he knew exactly how to dismantle a man like Decker, piece by piece, within the sterile walls of a courtroom. You are making a catastrophic mistake, Caldwell said, his voice muffled against the cold SUV, yet perfectly steady. Shut your mouth, Decker grunted, violently wrenching Caldwell's left arm behind his back. He ratcheted the steel handcuffs down brutally tight, ensuring the metal bit painfully into Caldwell's wrists. He grabbed the right arm and secured it, locking the cuffs with a vicious snap. Decker, stop, Jenkins finally yelled, stepping forward. I just ran the plates. Decker, listen to me. I told you to hang back, Jenkins, Decker barked. He patted Caldwell down aggressively, his hands searching the pockets of the cashmere coat. He found Caldwell's slim leather wallet and yanked it out, tossing it onto the hood of the car. Decker! The car isn't stolen, Jenkins insisted, her voice trembling. It's registered to a Raymond Caldwell. No flags, no warrants. Clean. Decker paused for a fraction of a second, but his ego refused to let him back down. He sneered, looking at the back of Caldwell's head. Yeah? Well, this guy probably stole the wallet and the keys. Look at him. You think he bought a $150,000 SV autobiography legally? Officer Jenkins, Caldwell spoke up, turning his head slightly to look at the rookie. Please ensure your body camera is activated and recording. You are currently witnessing an unlawful arrest, assault, and battery under the color of law. Your partner is going to face federal civil rights charges, and whether you join him as a co-defendant depends entirely on what you do next. Decker grabbed Caldwell by the collar and shoved him toward the police cruiser. "Keep walking, mouthpiece. You're going to the precinct." Decker practically threw Caldwell into the claustrophobic, hard plastic back seat of the cruiser. The judge awkwardly contorted his tall frame to fit, his shoulders aching from the unnatural angle of his tightly cuffed wrists. The door slammed shut, sealing him in silence. Outside, Jenkins was arguing with Decker. Though the thick glass muffled their voices, Caldwell could read their body language. Jenkins was pointing at the mobile data terminal, frantic. Decker was waving her off, aggressively pointing at the Range Rover, then at the gas station attendant, Luis, who had been watching the entire ordeal from behind the bulletproof glass of the register. Decker walked back to the Range Rover. Without a warrant, without probable cause, and ignoring Caldwell's rights, he opened the driver's side door and began to search the vehicle. Caldwell watched from the back of the cruiser, his jaw set in a tight, furious line. Decker was ripping through the center console, tossing pristine charging cables and luxury car manuals onto the passenger seat. Then, Decker moved to the back seat. He grabbed Caldwell's monogrammed oxblood leather briefcase, a gift from his wife when he was appointed to the federal bench. Decker popped the brass latches. Stacks of thick, legally bound documents spilled out. Decker haphazardly thumbed through them. Had he possessed the basic literacy and patience to read the headers, he would have seen the seal of the United States District Court and the words "Chambers of the Honorable Raymond Caldwell." Instead, Decker saw standard legal jargon, assumed it was the paperwork of a career criminal battling charges, and shoved it all back into the case, carelessly bending the corners of highly sensitive federal court documents. Finding zero contraband, no weapons, and absolutely nothing to justify his hunch, Decker slammed the SUV doors shut. He stomped over to Caldwell's wallet, which was still sitting on the hood. He flipped it open. Caldwell watched Decker's face carefully. He waited for the exact moment the realization hit. Decker pulled out the driver's license. He looked at the photo. He looked at the name, Raymond Caldwell. He looked at the address in Stone Creek. Then, Decker flipped through the wallet and found a heavy, gold-shielded identification card, a federal judge credential. Even through the dim lighting of the gas station canopy, Caldwell saw the blood completely drain from Decker's face. The aggressive, chest-puffing bravado evaporated in a microsecond, replaced by the pale, hollow stare of a man who suddenly realized he had just stepped off a cliff. Decker stood frozen, staring at the ID for a long 10 seconds. He looked toward the cruiser where Caldwell was sitting calmly in the back seat. The officer's breathing became shallow. He had just brutally assaulted, unlawfully restrained, and illegally searched the vehicle of a sitting federal judge. But Decker was too far gone, and his pride was too toxic to simply apologize and let the man go. In Decker's twisted logic, if he backed down now, he was finished anyway. His only play, his completely delusional play, was to double down, take Caldwell to the precinct, and find something, anything, to justify the detainment. Maybe a DUI charge, maybe a resisting arrest fabrication. Decker shoved the wallet into his own pocket and marched back to the cruiser. He slid into the driver's seat. Jenkins got in the passenger side, refusing to look at Decker, her face pale. "We taking him in?" Jenkins whispered, horrified. He resisted. Decker lied through his teeth, starting the engine. He belligerently refused a lawful order during an investigatory stop. Caldwell sat in the back, leaning forward slightly to speak through the metal grate. "Officer Decker," he said, his voice entirely devoid of anger, replaced by a chilling, absolute certainty. "You had a chance to walk away with a severe reprimand and a suspension. By putting this car in drive, you are ending your life as you know it. I promise you that." "Shut up back there!" Decker yelled, though his voice cracked slightly. He threw the cruiser into drive and sped off toward the Oakdale precinct, leaving the unlocked $150,000 Range Rover sitting beside pump number 4. The ride was suffocatingly silent. When they pulled into the sally port of the Oakdale Police Department, Decker yanked Caldwell out of the car. Caldwell's wrists were bleeding slightly where the metal had dug into his skin. They walked through the heavy steel doors into the booking area. Sergeant Arthur Harrison, a 20-year veteran with a graying mustache, was sitting behind the high elevated desk, filling out paperwork. "Got a live one, Tommy?" Harrison asked without looking up. "Resisting arrest. Disorderly conduct," Decker said loudly, pushing Caldwell forward. Sergeant Harrison sighed, putting his pen down, and looked over his reading glasses at the suspect. Harrison's eyes widened. He stood up slowly, pushing his chair back so hard it crashed into the wall behind him. The entire booking room fell deathly silent. Harrison looked from the bruised, bleeding wrists to the immaculate cashmere coat, and finally to the furious, unyielding eyes of the man in cuffs. "Tommy," Sergeant Harrison breathed, his voice trembling with a mixture of terror and disbelief. "What? What have you done?" Sergeant Arthur Harrison did not just stand up. He stumbled forward, his heavy-duty belt catching the edge of the desk. The color drained from his weathered face, leaving him looking sickly pale under the harsh fluorescent lights of the booking room. He had been with the Oakdale Police Department for 2 decades, and he knew every prominent figure in the county. "Tommy," Harrison whispered, his voice cracking. "Take the cuffs off. Now." Decker, still riding the adrenaline of his manufactured authority, scoffed. "Sarge, you didn't see him out there. He was non-compliant. He refused a lawful order, got belligerent. I said, take the goddamn cuffs off him," Harrison roared, his voice echoing violently off the cinder block walls. He rushed out from behind the raised desk, his hands shaking. "Do you have any idea who this man is, you absolute moron?" Officer Sarah Jenkins hovered near the door, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. "I tried to tell him, Sarge, the car was clean. It's registered to—" "I know who it's registered to, Jenkins," Harrison snapped, stopping a few feet from where Caldwell stood perfectly still. Harrison swallowed hard, his eyes dropping to the judge's wrists. The heavy steel handcuffs had been ratcheted down so tightly that dark purple bruising was already blooming across Caldwell's skin, and a thin trickle of blood stained the cuff of his white dress shirt. "Judge Caldwell," Harrison stammered, his posture shrinking into one of utter submission. "Your Honor, I cannot express how deeply sorry I am. This is a catastrophic misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding, Sergeant," Caldwell replied. His voice was not raised, but it carried the chilling, lethal weight of a gavel striking wood. "Your officer profiled me, bypassed running my vehicle's plates to fabricate reasonable suspicion, assaulted me, illegally searched a vehicle containing confidential federal court documents, and abandoned said vehicle unlocked and running at a public gas station. He then abducted me, under the color of law." Decker's jaw dropped. The word judge finally pierced through his thick skull. He looked at the bruised, bleeding man in the cashmere coat, and the reality of his career disintegrating washed over him in a cold wave. "Wait, you're a judge?" "Officer Decker," Caldwell said, slowly turning his head to look the younger man in the eye. "Do not touch me again. Sergeant Harrison, you will remove these restraints. Furthermore, I want Oakdale Chief of Police William Bradley down here immediately. I do not care if he is asleep. Wake him. And I want my attorney, Richard Sterling, contacted." Harrison fumbled with his keys, his hands trembling so badly he dropped them on the linoleum floor. He scooped them up, apologizing profusely as he unlocked the cuffs. Caldwell brought his arms forward slowly, wincing slightly as blood flow returned to his numbed hands. He didn't rub his wrists. He simply held them out, allowing the Sallyport security cameras to capture the deep, bleeding indentations. "Sarge, I thought the car was stolen," Decker pleaded, his arrogant facade completely shattering into a pathetic whine. "It's a $150,000 car. He was in a hoodie, a cashmere sweater." "You illiterate thug," Caldwell corrected coldly. "And my attire does not override the Fourth Amendment. You bypassed protocol because you want him to play cowboy. You searched my briefcase. You bent files pertaining to United States v. the Corelli Syndicate. Do you know what tampering with an active federal racketeering investigation carries, Officer Decker? Decker took a step back, looking like he was going to be sick. Within 20 minutes, the Oakdale precinct was a scene of controlled chaos. Chief William Bradley arrived in a rumpled suit he had clearly thrown over his pajamas, his face flushed with panic. Following closely behind was Richard Sterling, one of the most feared civil rights and corporate litigators on the East Coast. Chief Bradley practically sprinted into the holding area, extending a hand that Caldwell pointedly ignored. "Raymond, my God, I am so sorry," Bradley pleaded, looking at the bloody cuffs of Caldwell's shirt. "We are handling this internally. Decker is stripped of his badge and gun as of this exact second. He's suspended without pay pending termination." "Internal affairs is insufficient, Bill," Caldwell said, finally taking a seat on the cold metal bench, letting his high-priced lawyer take the floor. Richard Sterling, a tall man with predatory eyes, pulled out a digital recorder and placed it on the table. "Chief Bradley, my client was brutally assaulted and kidnapped. Furthermore, you left a $150,000 vehicle containing highly classified federal documents abandoned at a Chevron station. If one page of those documents is missing, I am holding your department accountable for obstruction of justice." We sent a squad car to secure the vehicle the moment Sergeant Harrison realized what happened. Bradley stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "It's safe. We have it." "Good," Sterling snapped, "because come tomorrow morning, the Oakdale Police Department, the city, and Officer Thomas Decker are going to be the defendants in a $10 million federal civil rights lawsuit. We are leaving now. We are going straight to County General Hospital to meticulously document my client's injuries." As Caldwell and Sterling walked toward the precinct doors, Decker, desperate and panicking, called out, "Judge, please, I have a family. I made a mistake." Caldwell paused. He didn't turn around. He just spoke over his shoulder, his voice echoing in the silent room. "Ignorance of the law is no excuse, Officer Decker. You taught me that at pump number 4. The fallout was nuclear. By 8 a.m. Wednesday morning, the lawsuit was filed in the United States District Court. The charges were blistering: deprivation of civil rights under color of law, 42 U.S.C. Section 1983, false imprisonment, assault, battery, and illegal search and seizure. The damages sought were exactly $10 million. The local news networks got wind of the story by noon. The optics were devastating for Oakdale. A prominent, highly respected black federal judge, known for his fair and meticulous rulings, assaulted and degraded by a local cop over a luxury vehicle. But Decker's police union, the Fraternal Order of Police Lodge 88, decided to play dirty. Their president, a bulldog named Frank Rossi, held a press conference claiming the media was blowing things out of proportion. Officer Decker was conducting a standard investigatory stop, Rossi declared to a sea of microphones. The subject was non-compliant and aggressive, refusing to provide identification. Unfortunately, there is no video evidence to corroborate the timeline, as Officer Decker's body camera suffered a critical battery failure, and the cruiser's dashcam storage was corrupted during the shift. It was the oldest, dirtiest trick in the corrupt cop playbook. No video, no proof. It would be a he said, she said. And the union banked on the fact that Oakdale juries historically backed the blue. Even Officer Jenkins was heavily pressured by the union to claim her own camera had malfunctioned, threatening her with a hostile work environment if she ratted. Sitting in his mahogany-paneled office, Judge Caldwell watched the press conference on his television alongside his attorney, Richard Sterling. Sterling chuckled darkly. Corrupted files and dead batteries. They really think they're dealing with a public defender fresh out of law school. Caldwell took a sip of his black coffee. Let them dig the hole deeper, Richard. Let them put the malfunction on the official sworn record. 2 days later, the initial discovery hearing took place. The Oakdale city attorneys, backed by the union's legal team, arrived looking smug. They submitted sworn affidavits from Decker claiming Caldwell was entirely at fault, aggressively resisting arrest, and that all camera equipment had conveniently failed. "Your Honor," the union lawyer stated smoothly to the presiding magistrate. "Without video evidence, this is simply a misunderstanding blown out of proportion." Officer Decker acted within his qualified immunity. Richard Sterling stood up slowly, buttoning his suit jacket. "It is truly a tragedy about the Oakdale Police Department's budget, Your Honor. That all their equipment would simultaneously fail on the exact night my client was assaulted." "Objection," the union lawyer snapped. "However," Sterling continued, his voice rising to a theatrical boom, "the Oakdale Police Department forgot one crucial detail. My client drives a 2025 Range Rover SV autobiography." Decker, sitting at the defense table, frowned. He didn't understand. "This particular luxury vehicle," Sterling said, pulling a sleek tablet from his briefcase, "comes equipped with Land Rover's proprietary 360-degree Sentinel security system. It utilizes 8 high-definition exterior cameras and 2 interior microphones. The moment Officer Decker's cruiser aggressively blocked the vehicle, the proximity sensors activated the system. The blood drained from Decker's face for the second time that week. Not only does it record in pristine 4K resolution," Sterling smiled, a shark smelling blood in the water, "but it instantly uploads the encrypted footage to a secure cloud server. It cannot be deleted. It cannot be corrupted by a rogue police officer." Sterling tapped the screen. The large monitors in the courtroom flared to life. There it was, crystal clear audio and video. The court watched as Decker lunged out of his cruiser, hand on his gun. They heard Caldwell politely and calmly asking for the reason for the stop. They heard Decker's sneering, racist remarks. They watched in high definition as Decker violently slammed the judge against the car, ratcheting the cuffs until the judge winced. They watched Decker illegally tear through the federal documents in the briefcase. And then, the final nail in the coffin. The video showed Officer Jenkins yelling, "Decker, the car isn't stolen. It's registered to a Raymond Caldwell." No flags, no warrants. Clean. Followed by Decker ignoring her entirely. The courtroom was dead silent, save for the hum of the monitors. The union lawyer slowly closed his legal pad, knowing his career was entirely compromised by submitting false affidavits. "As you can see, Your Honor," Sterling said quietly, "Officer Decker did not just violate my client's civil rights. By submitting a sworn affidavit claiming the cameras malfunctioned to cover up a crime, he has just committed felony perjury. The karma didn't just hit Decker. It crushed him like a freight train." The union immediately dropped their representation, citing that they could not defend an officer who lied on sworn documents. The city of Oakdale, terrified of a drawn-out, highly publicized trial they were guaranteed to lose, immediately folded. The city of Oakdale's legal defense did not just crumble. It disintegrated upon impact. The moment Richard Sterling played the encrypted 4K resolution footage from the Range Rover's Sentinel security system, the arrogant facade of the city's defense team shattered. Within 48 hours of the disastrous discovery hearing, Mayor Philip Montgomery and City Attorney Arthur Langdon requested an emergency closed-door mediation session. They did not want this going to a jury. A jury in a federal civil rights trial, presented with undeniable video evidence of an unprovoked, racially motivated assault on a highly respected sitting federal judge, would not just award $10 million. They would award punitive damages that could bankrupt the municipality. The mediation took place in the sterile, glass-walled boardroom of Sterling's downtown law firm. Mayor Montgomery, a man whose political career was currently dangling by a thread, sat sweating through his expensive tailored suit. Beside him, Chief of Police William Bradley looked like he had aged a decade in a week. Judge Raymond Caldwell sat perfectly still at the head of the table. He did not wear a suit. He wore a simple, impeccably pressed Oxford shirt, his wrists resting on the polished mahogany table. Faint, yellowish bruises were still visible where Decker's handcuffs had bitten into his skin. "We are prepared to offer a formal, public apology from the city," Arthur Langdon began, his voice lacking its usual courtroom bravado, and a settlement of $3 million. We believe this is a generous— Stop talking, Arthur, Richard Sterling interrupted, not even looking up from his legal pad. You are not in a position to negotiate. You submitted false affidavits. Your officers committed perjury. My client was battered, unlawfully detained, and his federal documents were illegally searched. The number is $10 million, not a penny less, and it comes with stipulations. Mayor Montgomery swallowed hard. $10 million is a significant portion of our municipal insurance umbrella. We can't simply— You will. Caldwell spoke for the first time, his deep baritone instantly silencing the room. Or we go to trial on Monday, and I assure you, Mayor Montgomery, the Department of Justice is already watching this case very closely. Do you want a federal consent decree placed over your entire police department? The city folded. They had no choice. The $10 million settlement was signed that Friday. But the karma was only just beginning to circle back on Oakdale, and more specifically, on Thomas Decker. Judge Caldwell was a wealthy man before the incident, having built a highly lucrative private practice before taking the bench. He didn't need the city's money. Instead, in a move of brilliant, devastating retribution, Caldwell took the entire $10 million payout after legal fees and established the Caldwell Justice Initiative. It was a non-profit legal defense fund headquartered directly across the street from the Oakdale Police Precinct. Its sole mission was to provide elite, aggressive legal representation to minorities and low-income individuals who were subjected to police harassment, unlawful stops, and civil rights violations in Oakdale and the surrounding suburbs. The city had essentially funded its own worst nightmare. Every time an Oakdale officer stepped out of line, they would find themselves facing a wall of high-powered attorneys paid for by the very money the city had handed over to make the Decker problem go away. But for Thomas Decker, the nightmare was fiercely personal. Being fired and publicly disgraced was merely the prologue to his downfall. Stripped of his badge, his union protection, and his pension, Decker found himself entirely isolated. The Brotherhood of the Badge abandoned him the moment the video proved he was a liability who lied under oath. His wife, horrified by the racist vitriol captured on the audio recording and terrified of the ensuing media circus, filed for divorce and took their 2 children to live with her parents out of state. 3 weeks after the civil settlement, the hammer of criminal justice fell. United States Attorney Catherine Miller handed down a federal indictment. Thomas Decker was arrested at his empty half-packed apartment by the FBI. The charges were staggering: deprivation of rights under color of law, 18 U.S.C., Section 242, and obstruction of justice for falsifying official reports. Because the victim was a federal judge, the trial was swift, merciless, and devoid of any local Oakdale sympathy. The presiding judge, the Honorable William Barrett, was a man known for his utter disdain for corrupt law enforcement. Decker's criminal trial lasted exactly 4 days. His public defender attempted to argue that Decker was poorly trained and acting under the stress of a high crime shift. But the high-definition footage of Decker sneering, mocking, and physically assaulting a calm, compliant citizen destroyed any narrative of an honest mistake. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning a verdict: guilty on all counts. On the day of sentencing, the federal courtroom was packed to absolute capacity. Reporters, civil rights activists, and law enforcement officials crowded the wooden pews. Thomas Decker, once a man who strutted through gas stations with his hand resting threateningly on his service weapon, now stood at the defense table in a faded orange correctional jumpsuit. His wrists were shackled, the heavy metal chains clinking softly as he trembled. He looked small, hollowed out, and utterly broken. Judge Raymond Caldwell, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, stepped up to the podium to deliver his victim impact statement. The courtroom fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. Caldwell adjusted his glasses and looked directly at the man who had assaulted him. "Mr. Decker," Caldwell began, his voice steady and resonant. "When you approached my vehicle at that gas station, you did not see a citizen. You did not see a man pumping gas. You saw a caricature constructed by your own prejudice. You possessed a badge, a gun, and the authority of the state, and you chose to weaponize them out of spite and arrogance. Decker stared at the floor, unable to meet Caldwell's eyes. You mocked the law that night, Caldwell continued. You told me that you asked the questions, implying that your authority superseded my constitutional rights. But the fundamental truth of our justice system, Mr. Decker, is that the law is not a shield for the corrupt, nor is it a weapon for the prejudiced. It is a mirror. And today, it reflects exactly what you are. Caldwell turned his gaze to Judge Barrett. Your Honor, a man who uses a badge to terrorize the public commits a crime not just against the victim, but against the very foundation of our society. I ask the court to impose a sentence that reflects the severity of this betrayal. Judge Barrett nodded gravely. He looked down at Decker. Thomas Decker. Judge Barrett's voice boomed through the chamber. You were entrusted with the safety of your community. You abused that trust in the most cowardly, egregious manner possible. And when confronted with your actions, you lied. You attempted to manipulate the system you swore to uphold. The irony is not lost on this court that the system you tried to corrupt is the very system that will now hold you accountable. Barrett struck his gavel. It is the judgment of this court that the defendant be remanded to the custody of the Federal Bureau of Prisons for a term of 96 months. 8 years. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Decker's knees buckled slightly, caught only by the U.S. Marshals flanking him. 8 years in federal prison, as a disgraced former cop, was a sentence that carried a terrifying weight. As the Marshals turned Decker around to lead him out of the courtroom, he briefly locked eyes with Caldwell. There was no defiance left in Decker's gaze, only the sheer, unadulterated terror of a man who realized he had willingly stepped into his own destruction. Officer Sarah Jenkins, the rookie who had attempted to intervene, was not charged. Caldwell explicitly requested that she be spared from the civil suit, noting her attempts to de-escalate her partner. She remained on the Oakdale force, but the culture shifted drastically. The Caldwell Justice Initiative loomed across the street, a constant, silent reminder to every officer who pinned on a badge. Judge Raymond Caldwell returned to his chambers the following Monday. He slipped his black robe over his shoulders, picked up his briefcase, the same leather briefcase Decker had carelessly thrown aside, and walked into his courtroom. He took his seat at the high bench, the seal of the United States gleaming behind him, ready to ensure that the law remained exactly what it was always meant to be, an equalizer. The flashing lights at the Chevron station were intended to display absolute authority, but they illuminated profound ignorance instead. Thomas Decker learned that a badge is never a shield against the truth. Justice, though occasionally delayed by the arrogance of men, remains a formidable force. A $10 million lesson transformed Oakdale forever, proving that true power lies not in intimidation, but in the unwavering and inescapable rule of law.